Hello Year 7 and welcome to English. It's Mrs. Oxborough here. I'm going to be taking you through the next few weeks worth of work looking at war poetry. You should have received two things: your English fact book and copies of the poems that we are going to be studying over the next few weeks. Hopefully you've got those in front of you because you are going to need those as we go through. So another couple of things that will be useful for you to have will be a pen or a pencil and possibly a highlighter for you to be able to analyse and look at the poems in more detail as we go through. Okay, so hopefully you've got those in front of you. So week 1 this week, we're going to be focusing on a poem called The Soldier by Rupert Brooke. So if you turn to that poem now, so you have it in front of you, it should be the first one in your pack, as well as the first one on your fact book as well. So let's get started. I want to start just by having a quick look at the context of this poem. Now, all of the poems that we're going to look through over the following weeks are focusing on war poetry, whether that be World War I or World War II or more current wars and conflicts. There will be a variety. Now, this poem, The Soldier, was written at the beginning of World War I, so approximately 1914. Now, in Britain at this time, there was a great sense of patriotism. People wanted to stand up for their country and were eager to join the army. They wanted to fight and protect their country. Now, propaganda was used to encourage men to join the army. Remember, it was just men during World War I and World War II that were eligible to sign up and fight. Now, much of the war propaganda presented what you might think is an unrealistic reality of war. Soldiers were made to look heroic for joining, and basically they glorified war. They wanted to make it look good and enticing so that men were happy to join up. Now, you'll see that there are two words that I've just gone through that I've highlighted and underlined for you. Now, these appear in your fact book as key words. So, patriotism and propaganda. Now, you see on the side of your screen that I've just picked those two out, just in case they're words that you've not come across before or that you're not sure of the meaning of them. So I'll just go through those now. So patriotism is the idea that a person is proud of and willing to support their country. They would do anything for their country. They might be referred to as patriotic. And propaganda is a biased or misleading piece of mass media. What I mean by that is it might come in the form of a poster or a leaflet. Sometimes it was even a radio broadcast. But essentially, the idea behind those pieces of media was a political message, a biased view, and often they painted this picture of war being a fantastic thing, a thing that you should do for your country, and they didn't really show the reality of war, certainly not death or killing or weaponry or anything like that in a negative way. It was always positive, showing a positive light on war. Now, some of those words you may have known before, some of them you may not be sure of. So take a bit of time now just to look at those meanings again. Maybe if you want to make a note of them, that might be a good idea as well. Now, if you're keen to find out more, particularly about propaganda, if you've not really looked at this before, it might be a nice idea for you now to do a little bit of research for yourself. This could be done on the internet. You could have a look at some typical images of war propaganda. I might suggest that you just type into Google something like British war propaganda posters. Have a little look around, see what you can find. There'll be lots of images. Maybe take some time, choose one, and think about what does it present to you about war? What sort of ideas, what message is it promoting to men? Would it make them want to join up to the war? Okay, are they positive or negative? So if you would like to have a go at doing a little bit more research now, then I'll invite you to pause the video here, take 5-10 minutes to do a bit of research and then come back. Okay, so now it's time to actually look at the poem that we're going to be studying for this lesson. So take a few moments, you should have it in front of you to read the poem to yourself. Whatever way you feel comfortable, if you want to read it aloud or if you want to read it in your head, either of those is absolutely fine. Alternatively, if you feel uncomfortable doing that and prefer the poem to be read to you, then there is a really good recording of the poem here. If you click on this link, it will take you to that video. Play the video, have a look at the poem, follow it through, and then come back. Okay, so at this point you should have read through the poem and have a feel for the style of it and what it sounds like. Okay, so also what I want you to make sure that you've got in front of you at this point is your fact book, because you're going to need to possibly refer to some sections of it for the rest of the lesson. So what I'd like to start with is by looking at the style and the rhythm of the poem. Now, it's written in the form of a sonnet, and it also uses iambic pentameter. Both of these are used to portray the poet's love for his country, his love of England. Now, again, you'll see that there are two words on this slide that I've put in bold and underlined. That's because these are words that I think maybe you might not have come across before, or that we need to ensure that you have a thorough understanding of before we continue. So, a sonnet. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines and typically has 10 syllables per line. So it's a very rigid structure, and it creates a certain way of reading the poem, a certain rhythm. Just a bit of a side note, you might have heard of a sonnet linked to other famous writers such as William Shakespeare. He was very keen to use this sonnet style, so that's a little side bit of information for you there. Secondly then, iambic pentameter. This refers to the pattern or rhythm of a line of poetry. It has to do with the number of syllables in the line and the emphasis placed on those syllables. Now, that's a little bit more confusing. So, as an example here, I've taken the first line of the poem, "If I should die, think only this of me." Now, you'll see those words that I've put in bold and underlined, die and me. As you read that line, you will naturally emphasize those words. If I should die, think only this of me. Have a go now at reading through the poem and see how the emphasis is placed and where it is placed in the lines of the poems. Have a go now. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at doing that and you've seen how that iambic pentameter works. Just for a little task for you, have a little go, try and investigate. Can you count how many lines the poem has? Check if it does fit that sonnet style. And can you hear the iambic pentameter? Go through your poem, maybe underline the use of the syllables, count them in your head and see how that emphasis is placed on each line. Have a go at that task now. Okay, so now it's time to go on to our main analysis of the poem. I'm going to break it down into little sections. If you have a highlighter or if you just want to use your pen or pencil, and then you can annotate and you can put notes onto your copy of the poem. You can listen to the things that I say as we go through. So the poem starts, "If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England." So the poet uses a first person narrative here. They use I to show that they are talking personally about England and about the war. It begins with a really clear patriotic tone. It's clear that the poet has a sense of pride for his country, as the poem is written as if a soldier is just about to leave to go off to war. So they have all of these patriotic ideas that they want to go and be brave and fight for their country. And the beginning of the poem really shows that. As we go on, "There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam." Now here the poet uses personification of England as a mother. So for those of you that are unsure, personification is where you give an object or an inanimate thing human-like qualities. So you'll see, you might want to underline, it refers to England with words such as bore and shaped and made aware. They're all sort of physical attributes that a mother might do. There is also information about this section on your fact sheet if you want a bit more detail. Next then, there's lots of imagery, this idea of Mother Nature. What I'd like you to do at this point is, with your highlighter or your pen or your pencil, go through the poem and see how many words you can find that might link to this idea of nature and Mother Nature. Just underline the words. Once you've done that, I want you to just have a little think about what effect those words might have. Do this task now. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that task. We're going to move on to the second stanza of the poem now with our analysis. "And think, this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind no less, gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given." Now here, we have a bit of a contrasting word, the use of the word evil. This is referring to this idea of war and possibly death. However, the poet is trying to paint a picture for us that despite the evil that might occur during war, the soldiers will still be heroic and their deaths will be heroic. This has a strong link here to some of the images and ideas that you may have seen when you did your research into propaganda. This idea that soldiers were going to be heroic and die not in vain for their country, but they would be praised. Let's continue. "Her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends and gentleness, in hearts at peace under an English heaven." Now we've got some really nice language here and some heavenly imagery. You might be able to pick out some words associated with this idea of heaven. Obviously the poem ends with the word heaven, but things such as hearts and peace and gentleness, it ends with a really calming image. And this idea at the very end of the poem suggests that despite the soldier more than likely being killed in war, that they should be happy and content to die for their country. Again, linking back to this really patriotic idea of men joining up, becoming soldiers and dying for their country. Okay, so hopefully you have got some of those annotations down and you've got a little bit more understanding of the poem. Finally then, just really quickly, there is a list here of keywords and themes that hopefully you can take on board and will learn from this lesson and be able to revise and remember in the future. Make sure you've got those written down, make sure that you can